Home charging, my absolute favorite thing about owning a Tesla and what I'm asked about the most. Yeah, the acceleration, self-driving, and very low running costs are great, but never having to think about how I'm gonna make my car go, that's the real reason to own one of these cars, in my opinion. And as someone that has used every single form of home charging and lived with, let's talk about everything you need to know when it comes to home charging, including the big one, price. Now, a quick disclaimer, please call a professional, an electrician. This is not something that you should try to DIY if you have no idea what you're doing. If you do something wrong, you could literally burn your house down or even worse. So, disclaimer out of the way, call a professional if you don't know what you're doing. There are 3 levels of charging: level 1, level 2, and level 3. 1 and 2 are both forms of home charging, whereas level 3 is DC fast charging. Think Tesla superchargers, Electrify America, the General Motor chargers that you see going in nowadays, all the big charging stations that you see out in public. These are not home charging, thus we will not be discussing them. So let's start with level 1, otherwise known as trickle charging on a 120 volt outlet. Even though EVs are pretty popular nowadays, people are still stunned when I tell them that you can just charge your car off of a normal outlet that you see sitting around your house. So with that being said, let me introduce you to the Tesla mobile connector. If you're buying a car new today from Tesla, this should come with your car. There was a brief period around 2022 to like 2024 that they stopped, but it seems as if they're back. My 2024 Model 3 Performance didn't have one, but my 2026 Model S Plaid did, and the 2026 Model Y Performance I have on order states it will also come with one. Now, the cool thing about the Tesla mobile connector that comes with your car is that the adapter or plug on the end can be swapped out. In fact, it should come with 2 different adapters, a level 1 adapter and a level 2 adapter. This used to not be the case. It used to only come with the level 1 adapter, and the extra adapter was like $40. So this is really nice to see them including it with the car. But getting back to the level 1 charging, the adapter that comes with it is a Nema 515 or just a normal plug. This will provide about 1.3 kilowatts or about 3 to 5 miles depending on your model. Tesla actually has some confusing data, as you'll find on one part of their site it says this will provide up to 6 miles, whereas on the other part it'll say up to 3. Nonetheless, like I said, I lived with this for like a year and a half, like strictly charging off of level 1, and I would recoup about 1% per hour, which on a Model 3 is like 3 to 4 miles. Now, a lot of people think that this is the only form of level 1 charging. However, there's actually a second plug or a second adapter. You have to get it separately from the one that comes with your car, but it's like a level 1.5, if you will. And you may actually have it in your garage and not know it. A Nema 520 or a normal outlet, but it has that little dash in one of the prongs. You probably know what I'm talking about. This plug will provide 1.7 kilowatts, an almost 25% increase over the 1.3 kilowatts on a 515. In miles, that's like 4 to 6 per hour. Now, if you're considering level 1 as your primary form of home charging, this is where you would need to do some calculations on your own. Are you home enough on average that a level 1 charger can recoup your daily commute? The average commute in the US is about 40 miles, meaning that for most people, a level 1 would technically work or at least be enough to get by. I believe the national average is that people are home for at least 12 hours. So 12 times like the bare minimum of 3, that's like 36. So that's like right at 40. You'll probably get a little bit more than that. And then you also can account for weekends, maybe where you're home more. So like you'll recoup extra on the weekends and you'll be able to start Monday at like a higher state of charge. It definitely can work. It worked for me. However, as someone that actually lived with it, there are a few things that people don't tell you. First is the efficiency. It's not great. It's only like 80% of what you pull actually makes it to the car. So on your electric bill, you're essentially paying for 20% extra energy that you're not actually getting. Secondly, if it's cold, like really cold, the charging just straight up will not work. This only happened to me a few times, and it was during like really big cold fronts. You see, the battery needs to be at a certain temp or warm enough to actually accept a charge. And when it gets super cold, like under 0, like when I say really cold, it was like sub-zero all the times that this happened, the energy that the car is using to keep the battery warm enough to charge is not being replenished fast enough by the level 1 charger. Thus, the car won't charge. It'll kind of just like sit, or it'll actually be a little bit less. Most times this happened to me, I would actually lose about 3 or 4% overnight because the car is just trying to keep the battery warm enough and the level 1 charger just isn't enough. And third, having now had level 2 charging for years and remembering what it was like to have level 1 charging, the peace of mind. You just don't get that with level 1. I always had to pay attention to my battery percentage or make sure I charged up a little more the night before just in case I wanted to take a longer trip or something. You just don't get that true "this is more convenient than a gas car" feeling because you're looking at and thinking about your battery percentage just as much, if not more, than you were looking at your gas gauge in your gas car. If level 1 charging is all you can get, I'm not trying to make you feel like bad about that by any means, but as someone that actually used it, and for people that are getting into an electric vehicle that may be thinking, because I see a lot of level 1 people like, oh, level 1's enough, level 1's enough. Yeah, it's enough, but like if you can get level 2, don't settle for level 1, if that makes sense. Speaking of level 2, well, that's what you should really be looking to get, otherwise known as a 240 volt charging solution. And while we're on the topic of solutions, what about your Tesla accessories solution? You know, all-weather floor mats, screen protectors, organizers, phone mounts. As someone that is awaiting delivery of their 5th Tesla now, I've used test stuff for all of my cars, and I'm not joking. Like, you can literally go back and watch older videos. All-weather floor mats, so you keep your car protected, looking great, and because they're XPE, they actually aid in rejecting road noise coming up through the floor. Screen protectors for obvious reasons. Inserts so you can actually organize all that extra space you got now with it being an EV. Test Stuff has it all, and I'll have everything that I use linked down below, and you can use code YouTube all caps for 10% off your entire order. And if you're watching this as it goes live, all back-ordered items are shipping before the end of the month. Now, level 1 was really easy to explain. It's just 2 different plugs. Level 2, however, is a lot of different plugs and then also dedicated charging boxes. But let's start with the plugs, as that mobile connector is still viable here. And it just so happens that the plug Tesla includes now with the car, the Nema 1450, is tied with the Nema 650 for the fastest mobile connector adapter that you can get. At 7.6 kilowatts, or as Tesla estimates, about 30 miles per hour. The whole miles per hour is kind of an arbitrary number because like if you drive with like a lead foot, then like that doesn't actually mean anything. So when I say 6 times the speed of the 515, I'm talking about the kilowatt output, not the estimated miles per hour. But estimated miles per hour is more easy to digest as a newcomer to EVs, but you'll kind of eventually start using kilowatts and percentage instead of miles and stuff like that. Now, there are other adapters at the 240 volt rating, right? The 615, the 620, the 1030, and the 1430. If you don't know, the latter number is the amount of amps that it can pull. Now, there's not really a reason to get one of these other adapter plugs installed in your garage, as you already have a 1450, which, like I said, is the fastest. But yeah, moving up to something like a 1450 solves all 3 of the problems I previously mentioned, right? It charges just fine in sub-zero temp, efficiency skyrockets to mid to high 90s, and you get that true EV experience of just never having to think about it. It really does feel like you're cheating because not only is it more convenient now than a gas car, but it's also much cheaper. I always try to make sure I mention that anytime I talk about cost. The real savings comes from charging at home. In fact, my Model S has free supercharging. I did a video a few weeks ago. I bought the Lux package. It has free supercharging. It's gonna be great for road trips, right? It's gonna be super cheap for road trips. But even if there was a supercharger, the nearest one's like 20 minutes from me. Even if there was one right down the road, no, I would gladly pay the 10 cents per kilowatt hour just to charge in my garage than to drive and sit somewhere for 30 minutes. That's how convenient home charging is. Getting back on track though, yeah, the mobile connector is super versatile. I can do level 1 and level 2 charging. I'll talk more about it in just a second, but there's an even better option, better in quotations, for some people, a dedicated charging station or like charging box, if you will. From Tesla, this is the wall connector or universal wall connector. If you're just charging your Tesla, there's no difference. However, if you have a non-NACS, otherwise known as the North American Charging Standard EV, the universal wall connector actually has a J1772 adapter built in. Also, it supports power sharing, meaning you can power your house, but Only Cybertruck supports that. And seeing as I don't plan to own a Cybertruck or a non-NACS EV, I went with the normal wall connector. Also, the universal wall connector wasn't in the referral program when I bought my wall connectors, so that was another reason I just went with the normal ones. But yeah, with that being said, there are a few reasons to go for a wall connector over the mobile connector. First is the obvious. It can be even faster. Both of my wall connectors are hooked up to individual 60 amp breakers, meaning they can pull a constant 48 amps or 11.5 kilowatts. This equates to about 44 miles that Tesla estimates per hour. A 51% increase in speed over the Nema 1450 adapter with the mobile connector. Another reason is that multiple wall connectors can be daisy chained off of the same breaker, thus enabling you to charge multiple cars at the same time if your system can't handle individual breakers. This really does open up a lot of combinations and possibilities for problem solving if your system isn't big enough. It's also weatherproof, so if you can't install it inside, you can install it outside. The cord is also longer, 24 feet versus 20 feet. It looks better, at least in my opinion. I think it just looks a lot fancier than the big plug into a receptacle. It just looks more professional. And it's just inherently safer. A dedicated charging box is made to do what you're wanting it to do, which is to pull high power for a continuous period pretty much every single day. Now, before I get into what you should get based on your circumstances, let's discuss pricing, as that could play a role into what you end up going with. The mobile connector straight from Tesla, if you didn't get one with your car, 300 buckaroos. Please note that this is the new Gen 3 that is black and supports bi-directional charging for Cybertruck and the upcoming Model Y Performance. If those don't matter, then you can try and get a Gen 2 mobile connector for less. It's just a different color and doesn't support the bi-directional charging. The charging speeds are literally exactly the same. Just make sure it's authentic if you are buying it from a third-party store or eBay. The wall connector and the universal wall connector are $450 and $600 respectively. Now for the install pricing, so what I personally paid and some tips that I ended up learning the hard way. First, if you didn't read the fine print of the comparison of the cars when you were ordering your car, please note that the rear-wheel drive Teslas can only go up to 32 amps for level 2 home charging. This is different than DC fast charging. This is AC charging, so just note that the two are different. The converter in the rear-wheel drive cars only goes up to 32 amps. And the mobile connector can only do 32 amps despite it having a 50 amp adapter, right? The 1450 and the 650 are both 50 amp adapters. So technically with the NEC 80% roll, they should be able to pull a constant 40. There actually used to be a corded mobile connector. I actually talked about this in my last home charging video, but they don't sell anymore, which is one of the reasons I'm just making this updated video. There used to be a corded mobile connector. It could do 40 amps. Nonetheless though, rear-wheel drive cars can only do 32 amps and the mobile connector can only do 32 amps. Now this is important to know because some electricians, after hearing that your mobile connector will only do 32 amps and you're putting it on a Nema 1450, because there's no such thing as a 40 amp receptacle or 40 amp plug, will try to install a 40 amp breaker and an 8 gauge wire for a 1450, even though it can't pull an instant 50 amps like what the receptacle is rated at. Like I said, there's no 40 amp plug, and technically in most areas around the US, my area included, this is up to code and will pass. However, I don't recommend it. I've seen the term bootstrapping. Some people just call it lazy. I would recommend just getting the 50 amp installed on the 50 amp receptacle, even if technically you can get it installed on a 40 amp. Can you tell I had this happen to me? I actually mentioned this in my last home charging video, and I actually had quite a few electricians reach out via email and stuff telling me that, yeah, the guy was more than likely just trying to save me money, as the difference in install, they did end up coming back out and redoing it. They were nice enough to only charge me the difference in materials and not labor again. It went from $350 to $550, 70% increase in price. So he was just trying to save me money, but that's just a heads up, a warning for you guys. Just get the 50 amp installed on the 6 gauge wire. If you ever leave the house or whatever it is, someone plugs them, so you just don't gotta worry about it. Another thing to know that I learned the hard way is pony up the extra money for the nicer industrial grade outlet. Now, I didn't specifically request a cheaper outlet. It's just kind of what they provided, but I didn't request the nicer I think the brand's Hubble's the one that everyone recommends. If you don't know, a normal 1450 outlet isn't meant to be unplugged and plugged in constantly, like maybe a few dozen times in its life. But even if you're not planning on unplugging it a lot, I probably unplugged mine less than 10 times, and I would still recommend the better outlet. I ended up getting an overheating issue after about a year, and when I moved and unplugged my mobile connector to take it with me, I noticed that the plug was starting to get some burn marks on it. Like I said earlier, dedicated charging boxes were meant to charge cars. These outlets, not so much. But if you're going to, at least get the good materials, get the 50 amp, get the 6-gauge wire, get the nice receptacle, do everything that you can. But back to price, the first wall connector I had installed was right at $1,300. However, there wasn't a lot of extra stuff that had to be done. Access panel in the wall and then in the ceiling, breaker boxes in the basement, had to run it to the outside of the house, around, bust back in through the garage. So there was a bunch of extra stuff. The second wall connector I had installed last week was like half the price. It was $700, which I know sounds a lot more expensive. I mean, it's almost triple the price, especially the first install. But keep in mind, that's a 60 amp breaker versus a 50 amp, 4-gauge wire versus a 6-gauge wire, a literal like 10 times the run length. Had I actually had the wall connector installed a foot away from the breaker box like I did the Nema 1450, it would have been right around the same price. In fact, the wiring to get either a Nema 1450 or a wall connector is gonna be around the same price. Like the wiring is pretty much the same. It's just how they terminate's a little bit different. But lastly, for price, whole system upgrades. Hopefully this isn't you, but if it is, yeah, it's gonna be pretty expensive. The average American spends around $1,000 a year on gas. So even going the wall connector route, right? So like $600–700 for an install plus another $400 for the actual wall connector, you're looking at around about $1,000. So after about a year or so, you should start to be profitable in your EV charging versus gas. But whole system upgrades, yeah, it may take a long time to actually be profitable. If it's worth it or not is completely up to you. I've seen some whole system home upgrades be like $5–10+thousand. Like it's really, really expensive. So to be honest with you, I would look at your breaker box system situation before you even think about ordering an EV. So now, which one should you go with? Well, in my opinion, it depends on your housing situation. If you own your house and you plan to be there for the next 5+ years and your system has room, it's not even a question, right? Just go ahead and get the wall connector. That's easy. If you don't own your house, let's say you're renting, maybe ask your landlord if they'd be willing to pay for a wall connector install. EVs are becoming very popular nowadays and used ones are becoming affordable. So it could very well attract renters after you and could even rent for slightly more. If they agree, well then that's great. But if not, more than likely they'll say no. I would just go for the 1450 plug route or whatever 240 volt plug the house can take. Now, if level 2 is just out of the question, you can make level 1 work. Like I said, I did. You just gotta pay attention and be on top of your battery. If you're renting an apartment, maybe see if they offer a garage space that you could pay extra for. If you are looking at going the wall connector route, the only tip that I can give is that if you're trying to figure out where you should put it, I would recommend putting it toward the front of your garage as it'll reach any car within your garage, but also out to your driveway in case you have a car in your driveway you need to charge. Maybe your garage is full, whatever it is. This is how my first one is. I love it. I've actually had to use it to charge stuff out, like when the car's sitting out. Maybe I have mobile service coming super early. I'm not going to be up, but I want the car to charge overnight. I can run the cord out of the garage with the garage still closed and it reaches it just fine. But yeah, that's pretty much everything you need to know about home charging. If you have the capability to get a home charger, I 100% recommend it over solely relying on the supercharging network. Like, yeah, you can totally rely on the supercharging network. Like, you don't need home charging, but in my opinion, home charging is like half the reason to own a Tesla. And I actually know that upsets a lot of people when I say that, but it's like the convenience, the price per kilowatt hour. It's also just better on your battery. The convenience alone is worth it for me. If you are new around here and you want to see more Tesla related stuff in your YouTube feed, then feel free to subscribe and I will see you all in the next one. Oh my God, dude. Oh my God. I'm sorry I didn't upload last week. I was so sick, and then I saw the new Model Ys got announced and everyone was just cooking them. So I just, oh.